You know, when you're at the vet clinic and you're just kind of sitting there with your dog, waiting for your appointment, have you ever just looked around the room at all the different characters in the vet clinic and what they're going through? Because if you did, I mean, sometimes you have to focus on your own dog. I get that. I get that. Sometimes you're like, I'm here for my dog and trying to be a good leader, like you told me to, Tracy, and I'm paying attention to my dog. I get it. I get it. But have you ever just looked around at a busy vet clinic and just kind of checked out all of the dogs hanging out there? You would see a variety of examples of classic overwhelm. So many different behaviors that you can see happening. And why not? I mean, again, this is no shade on vet clinics. They're doing the very best that they can. But honestly, it's a pretty stressful room. You've got, sometimes puppies that they don't know what they're there for. They haven't experienced yet, so they're just excited. Then you've got, dogs that aren't feeling their best and therefore feeling very, very vulnerable. You've got the dogs that know what's coming, those dogs, they've seen it. They've been in it. They're looking at the puppies like, you don't even know. You don't even know. Sure, they'll try to give you a liver treat, but don't be fooled. There's a needle there that's happening. Anyway, I've spent a lot of time, as I mentioned before, observing dogs and dog behavior. And this quiet observation has really helped me not only sort of pick up on nuances of dogs' behavior, but also allowed me to know when I need to step in, why I need to step in, really starting to trust my judgment on, how dogs are feeling in the moment. And I wanted to talk about that a little bit today. This question of how do you know if your dog is overwhelmed? How can you tell? What do you do? We're going to talk all about overwhelm today here on the podcast. Let's get into it. Ready to have a calm and peaceful life with your dog without the stress of those fear-based behaviors? Hi, I'm Tracy, and I've been there, overwhelmed by all the conflicting dog training advice and unsure of what to do next. But now I help dog lovers like you simplify your life with your dog by building confidence naturally, fostering trust, and addressing those fear-based challenges. So, if you're ready, stop chopping those chicken wieners and let's get to it. This episode is brought to you by the Calm Down Dog Boot Camp, featuring Tracy
and Paisley,
happening February 10th and 11th.
Okay, serious question. What if the thing you've been trying to train out of your dog isn't actually a training issue?
Ooh, shall I say you have to go beyond obedience?
Ah, very nice. Very clever, Mom. So what you're saying is my dog isn't being a stubborn brat.
No, and if you're frustrated with the training that just isn't working, it just might be time to take a different approach.
Like understanding what's really going on inside your dog's head?
Exactly, and that's why I'm so excited about this boot camp. It's a game changer. We're going to unpack the biggest thing standing in your way, which is actually your mindset.
The number one thing your dog needs to feel safe and confident.
Yep, and spoiler alert, it's not more treats.
Or endless sit commands.
Exactly. So if you're ready for a real breakthrough, sign up today at beyondobedience.ca/bootcamp. This is a free 2-day boot camp happening February 10th and 11th.
Just 1 hour each day and you'll walk away with real actionable steps to help your dog feel safe, calm, and secure.
I'm super excited and we can't wait to see you there. Hello, 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 and welcome to Beyond Obedience. I'm Tracy. It's your friend. We're hanging out together. We're talking dogs. It's one of my favorite things to do is hang out with dog lovers like you and talk about dogs. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. I wanted to talk a little bit about overwhelm today because overwhelm is like the precursor to like stress or precursor to the reactive behavior. It's the stuff that if you start to pick up on when your dog is feeling overwhelmed, it can really be a preventative for reactive behavior. And so that's why I thought we should highlight it a little bit today, you and I, recognizing early signs. It's going to allow you to sort of intervene and prevent the situation escalating. And sometimes we can't, there's not much we can do, right? Like in that moment, like for example, the vet clinic is a great example of that. Sometimes there's not much we can do. We have to go to the vet. We have to sit in. I think I mentioned this in an episode before, in the anxiety soup. We have to float in the anxiety soup. But if you're starting to pick up on some of these signals, these signs that your dog is overwhelmed, maybe it's a good idea to just step outside for a little bit. Take your dog for a little walk. Let them kind of sniff. Let them kind of get out some of that anxiety that they're feeling, so that they're not quite as stressed. Because if you think about it, if we're sort of allowing our dogs to sit in the overwhelm or in the anxiety soup, as I like to say, I've really made a visual for myself with that. I've really made a visual for that. Every time I say now anxiety soup, I just feel myself like floating in like a hot tub with like arm floaties. Why am I wearing arm floaties? Wearing arm floaties, just floating in a hot tub, just in the anxiety soup, just like, I can't get out. I don't know. Why did that visual come up? I don't know. Now it's your visual. You're welcome. Your dog has arm floaties. You and your dog just sitting in the anxiety soup, floating around. I regret it now that I've said it, but it's out there. So we're just going to have to go with it. But if you can start to recognize it, maybe there are some things that you can do. And as we've been talking about in the most recent episodes, one of the first things that you can do is be a little bit more calm for your dog. Make sure that you're taking some deep breaths. Oddly enough, this is something that I do talk a lot about for my students and for my one-on-one coaching, is this idea that, the dogs are mirroring us. So playing around with deep breathing to see if you can get your dog to mirror that is something that I do in my Be With sessions, which is kind of fun. If you don't know what Be With is, we're going to be talking about that a little later, because there's a special thing happening. I haven't finished it yet. I'm not going to lie. We got some other things happening. You just got to be patient. It'll come, but just so you know, we're going to put that out there. But we do talk a little bit about that. But let's today talk about just what are some signs. Let's look at the signs of overwhelm that your dog might be exhibiting. The first thing that we're going to talk about is sort of the subtle stress signals. Stress signals came out as a thing a little while ago. There's been a lot of good books on this idea that our dogs are showing these signs and you can pick up on them. I actually do caution some people that get a little bit too into the like staring at their dog looking for stress signals. I want you to sort of take this with with the idea that I want you to know about them, but I don't want you to hyper focus on it, right? I've met so many people that are like just sitting there staring at their dog being like, is that a whale eye? I'm not sure if that's a whale eye. Like, I don't want you to get hyper fixated on it. I want you to know. And then you're going to take a look at all the other factors to formulate your idea. So I do find that, when the stress signals started to come out and became more mainstream and people were starting to understand them a little bit more, I found that there was a bunch of people that hyper focused on it. Like, my dog did a lip lick, and then freaked out about it. Let's just take it all in. But I'm going to go over it so that you have them. If you want to get a pen and a paper, you can write some of these down. If you're like, I didn't know about stress signals, Tracy, what are they? Some of the subtle stress signals would be yawning. Yawning is a big one. Lip licking. That's a tongue twister for me. Or tongue flicks. So licking lips sort of out of the context of where you would expect it to be, right? Panting is another sign of stress, especially when it's not hot, right? If it's not warm out and you're like, that's weird, why is my dog panting? That'd be why. Ears being pinned back or sideways, sometimes that's an indicator. Dilated pupils or whale eye. As I mentioned, whale eye is when you can see the whites of their eyes, where they're kind of like, woo, I just made the face. We're not on YouTube yet, so you wouldn't have seen that face, but it's showing the whites of their eyes. Okay, so those are some of the subtle stress signals. Some body language changes that might happen if your dog's feeling overwhelmed is freezing, right? Where they just kind of stop all of a sudden and they become kind of stiff, right? Cowering, crouching, or trying to make themselves smaller. Tail tucking and being low, and like I say, stiff wagging, like just that really, really stiff, the stiff, slow wagging. That's kind of an indication that they're feeling something, and overwhelm might be one of them. And then here's some other things that I think some people don't necessarily recognize is sometimes when dogs are overwhelmed, you're going to see behaviors like sniffing, right? Where all of a sudden they just turn and they start sniffing the ground. Like they're just like, I'm not paying attention to that thing that's making me overwhelmed. And I know that might be a hard one because somebody would be like, what if they were just smelling stuff? Because my dog's sniffing all the time. It's when it's kind of out of context, right? If you're sitting, for example, in the vet clinic and you've been in that spot for a while, and then a bunch of dogs come in and all of a sudden a dog walks into the space and your dog starts sniffing the ground now, that's probably a stress signal, right? That's an overwhelm thing. That's like, this energy is overwhelming me and I'm trying to sort of deflect and do this other thing. Same with scratching themselves, right? Like in the presence of all the stimulus, they just start scratching at their ears or behind their leg, that kind of a thing. I've even gone as far as to see dogs start digging, like terriers will probably like, I just got to get this out. Like I'm feeling overwhelmed, so I'm just going to dig. So in reference to all of those, that's when it's out of context. Okay. It's not in the right place. They're doing something that's different and doesn't make much sense. That's when it's probably a sign of overwhelm. Some sort of grander behavioral indicators would be sudden loss or interest in treats or toys. We see this a lot for fearful dogs. People will say this to me all the time. My dog won't even take a treat or a toy in the presence of being fearful. That's a common one that we see. Avoiding eye contact or turning away. Here's a fun one. Hyperactivity, like zoomies. Believe it or not, the zoomies is a way for them to kind of release some stress. So if they've been feeling overwhelmed, they might have this zoomies to kind of quelch that and get that out. And then there are some like vocalizations like whining or barking or growling. Okay. So we have all of those signs there that, your dog might be overwhelmed. To keep it into context, it has to be out of context, right? Yawning out of context, yawning when they're not tired, lip licking when they're not eating or something, right? Panting when it's not hot. Like all of these things has to do with it's out of context of what they would normally do. And then environmental cues. This is important because remember I said I don't want you hyper focusing on subtle stress signals. I don't want you sitting there staring at your dog going, is that a lip lick? Is that a whale eye? Is he panting? Like, what's he doing? Is his breath like faster? Like, I don't want you doing that. I want you to take it all in. Is it in context? And are there environmental clues going on? The environment will tell you a lot. As I've mentioned, the vet clinic is probably a great place because it's filled with so many different dogs feeling different emotions. Dogs that aren't feeling well, and owners too. Let's put that out there. Owners that aren't feeling great. Owners that maybe are there because it is the end of life decision or whatnot. Like there's so many things that are happening there that can affect it. So we want to make sure we take a look at the environmental cues that are going on, like crowded areas, loud noises, chaotic settings, that kind of thing. Or, and this is one that's probably a lesser than thought of environmental cue, would be something that is out of place. So, for example, you're out in the woods and there's a roadway, and on this particular day, there's a ton of cars for whatever reason going down this roadway. And if this is an area where your dog is used to going, where like you take the dog because nobody's ever there and it's really, really quiet, but on this particular day, there was a ton of cars, that outlier is going to cause a lot of overwhelm for the dog. It's interrupting patterns. It's things that are out of place. They don't make sense to the dog because you've got forest and you've got forest smells and all of that sort of stuff. And then you've got a diesel engine. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't blend and go well. That right there can cause some overwhelm for your dog. All right. I hope that makes sense. So, what can we do? What do we do if our dog is overwhelmed or getting overwhelmed? First of all, you know me. Oh, gosh. Are you sick of me saying this yet? I want you to observe the behavior without judgment. Like, again, I don't want you analyzing it and spending all this time going, is that that? Is that that? I wonder what that means. I really need you to get out of your head for this, because remember what I say, to be a good leader means that you have to be present. You have to be able to respond to situations without overreacting, right? You need to be there. If you are in your head judging the behavior, analyzing the behavior, what do you think that means? You're not responding to the behavior. You're just analyzing it. And that's not helpful to anyone. Okay? So what are you going to say instead? Oh, how interesting. We're just going to say, how interesting. And stay curious. You're going to avoid the frustration. Then, if possible, move your dog away from the overwhelming environment. Like I mentioned in the vet clinic, maybe you need to get up and you need to take the dog out for a little bit. Take them for a little walk. Just let the receptionist know. I'm going to take him out for a quick pee. Let him sniff. Let her like walk around a little bit. Just take her out of the environment for a little bit. Let her shake that off. We do see that a lot too, right? Like dogs that, after they've had some sort of event or energy or play or whatnot, and they shake it off. Like, let them shake it off. I'm really, if you know me, I'm like a massive, almost obsessive Taylor Swift fan. And every time I say shake it off, I have to like really hold back and not start singing Taylor Swift songs. So you're welcome. But if it happens one podcast, she'll be like, oh, she couldn't do it. If I start singing, she'll just be like, she couldn't do it. That's what happens to me every time I say shake it off. But removing them from it, allowing them some time to get to a place where they can shake it off, and then reset, kind of a thing. And remember, the reason why I say that is because if your dog is in the anxiety soup environment, the longer that they're there, the harder it is for them to hear you. Okay, the longer your dog sits in that environment, feeling the overwhelm and having the anxiety build, the harder it is for them to hear you. Now, I don't know, have I explained this on the podcast? Maybe I have, maybe I haven't. I should make a note. We'll do it some other time. But I will quite often, my students in the Fearful Dog know that I've mentioned this and whatnot. But I do talk a lot about this idea of right brain and left brain when it comes to your dog's behavior. Not actually the left and the right. Like, that's not how brain morphology works. But this idea that the left brain is what we would call the thinking brain, right? And the right brain is called the instinctual brain. So without getting into the actual morphology of the brain with the primal brain and the some people call it the upper brain, the lower brain, whatever. I like to call it left and right, right? It's just a way to think of it, but essentially think of the brain as two different sides of your brain. So for me, the left brain means the thinking brain. That's the side that accesses English as a second language, right? That's where your dog learns obedience and how to understand us humans. But the right side of their brain is their instinctual brain. That's their survival brain. That's their drives and everything like that. So what happens if a dog is sort of sitting in that anxiety soup too long is that they start to flip over to their right brain. They go into a survival mode. And when they are in their right brain, it's really hard for them to flip back and access that left side of their brain, that thinking brain. So if you're sitting in the anxiety soup with them and you're noticing the overwhelm and you're trying to soothe your dog with your words or obedience or whatnot, it's not going to work. And it's not that they're ignoring you, and it's not that they, it's just simply that they can't hear you when they're right brained. They don't hear you the same way, right? So you want to make sure that you can find a way to remove or reduce that stressor in some way, and then provide them with some predictability, and maybe some calming activities like sniffing. Sniffing will help, right? Sniffing is going to be something that they're going to want to do because that is part of their natural sort of way. But get to be a part of that, get in with the sniffing and be like, what are you sniffing over there? Like, get into it so that you can reconnect before going back to the stressor. If, I keep on thinking of the case of the vet clinic, but, and then third, you're going to make sure that you adjust your own energy, right? You're going to stay calm. You're going to avoid adding to their stress by being more frantic or getting, anxious yourself, because your calmness is a signal. It's a safety signal to your dog. They're going to, when you start building, after you've been doing a lot of this work and you're really working on building this incredible bond with your dog is going to look to you for that feedback. How are you feeling? I'm feeling nervous. How are you feeling? You're okay? Okay, maybe then I should be okay, right? That works. It really does work. You become the greatest influence in your dog's life, right? So if you are that great influence in your dog's life, you got to step up, shake it off. Oh my gosh, it's getting so hard to keep the Taylor Swift inside me. And then, if you want to, you can work on resilience over time. If these are triggers that your dog, has to get over or has to see on a regular basis, then definitely I would work on resilience over time, like, doing gradual desensitization and all of that good stuff. But, if I'm being honest, I would just keep working on me and being the person that my dog needs to be and building that relationship with me, because I can be the security blanket in my dog's life. Like that's what I've come to realize with this work. I end up being that security that they need, right? Rather than having them deal with everything. They still have the like, oh my gosh, that scared me. But they're like, oh, are you okay? Good, then I'm okay. Other than the other sort of stuff about like, you can introduce new environments or small stimulus at a time and reward their behavior. And you want to reduce layered stress. Okay, that's the biggest thing for me. If you have a stressful event that happens that you cannot avoid, like going to the vet, then the rest of the day, let's do nothing. Right? Let's go back to familiarity. Let's go back to the old stomping grounds. Let's go back to the house. Let's go back to our comfort zone. Let's go back so that we can reset, absorb what we've learned, and not get caught up in the anxiety, right? You don't want to go to the vet and then also go to the dog park. Like, let's not do that. Let's not go to the vet and also take your dog to the pet store. Let's just go to the vet and go home. And then maybe go for a nice walk in a familiar place where everything's predictable to kind of shake that off. Oh gosh, it's getting harder. Okay, so I hope that helps. I'm going to give you, let's recap. We'll quickly recap it in case you missed it. Some of the signs to know that your dog is overwhelmed. Subtle stress signs like yawning, lip licking, tongue flicks, panting, ears being pinned back or sideways, dilated pupils or whale eye, body language changes like freezing, cowering, crouching, tail tucking, stiff waggings, and then those bizarre ones like sniffing, scratching, or digging in the presence of the trigger. Behavioral indicators like loss of interest in treats or toys, avoiding eye contact, hyperactivity like zoomies, vocalization like whining. Remember, we're not going to take those as, isolated incidents. We're going to look at the whole overarching thing. We're going to be checking out environmental cues. We're going to be seeing, does this make sense in the environment that we're in, or is it off? We're going to observe without judgment. And then we're going to try to either reduce or remove the stressor. We're going to adjust our own energy, and we're going to reduce our layered stress. That's how we're going to avoid that. And we're constantly going to work on, how can I be the person that my dog needs me to be in this moment? I hope that helps. I hope you're like, besides the fact that now you're thinking a lot about anxiety soup and shaking it off. But if you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to share it. Share it with a friend. Reach out to a friend and be like, have you checked out Tracy's podcast? I think you would love it. And we can all get to hang out together. If you haven't already and you're listening on Apple, please be sure to give me a 5-star written review. It really does help to push this podcast out to more and more people. You can tap the 5 stars on Spotify, or just share it. Just share it. I just like to hang out with you and your friends. Let's do this together. If you're looking for more support from me on how you can help your dog that is being overwhelmed, be sure to go ahead and book one of my Calm Confident coaching calls. Why not? Book a call. We can hang out